Our next guest on the Any Given Monday podcast. Well, if I listed all his ultra running accomplishments, we wouldn't have time to talk to the man. But here's a few. Multiple time winner of the Spine Race and Irish 24-hour running championships, and Arthur O'Neill, multiple time winner, had the Irish 24-hour record for distance, as well as having the 48-hour 349 kilometres and 6 days at 815 kilometres. Set a world record for missing to Maidenhead. I'm nearly done. 4-time winner of Athletics Ireland's Ultra Runner of the Year, and has a CV so good he was the first Irishman ever invited to the Barkley Marathons. Eoin Keith, welcome to this week's episode of the Any Given Monday podcast. How are you getting on?
I'm good, and it's great to finally be here.
Eoin, I have to say, Sean usually butchers an intro for people, but I think for you, he did it the credit he deserved. What a CV you have. That's impressive. What are you running from? Who do you owe money to? What's going on?
Yeah, that's a good question. We're running from reality, I suppose.
I think a lot of people who listen and we follow the same format. It's easy to see the accomplishments, but not everyone knows where everyone starts. For you to go to this supreme ultra runner and highly accomplished, where did the sport and how did you get into sport, running? Where did it all start for you?
Yeah, it's a bit of a bizarre story, to be honest, and it could take a while in itself. My first sport, really, because I was, as a kid, I was crap at sport. And, in school, all the running races are sprints. So a good day for me would have been second last, because I, believe it, obviously enough, being so good at ultra long distances, the other side of the coin is I'm a crap sprinter. And this really shows. And of course, all the ball sports are sprinty sports. And I grew up in Cove, County Cork, which is a multi-sports town, and plenty of options. And I was pretty crap at nearly all of them. And, in school, I would have been in the, there'd have been the serious lads and the send the other lads off into the corner to mess around, and I was, always in the corner messing around group. But off my own bat, I discovered with a few friends of mine pitch and putt. So that was actually my first sport, which I took seriously, and that was my teenage years. And I got very into that, and what I enjoyed about that in particular was the competitive side of it. And yeah, that I was really able to take out my competitive instincts on that. And I had a great time doing that. And as I say, it was many years doing it and really enjoyed it. And then when I got to college, that kind of dropped away. But I had friends who were into scouting and things like that, and fellow co-friends. And one of my fellow co-friends became captain of the UCC Mountaineers, where I went to college. And himself and one of my friends from my own class, computer science. Again, I was a proper nerd all the way, non-sporty nerd. And they kind of forced me into a position one day where I had to go hill walking with them because I was visiting them up in Dublin. And it was like, you're coming with us or you're spending the weekend in the house on your own. Which do you want to do? And so they dragged me out into the hills around Glendalough, and it was a big revelation, dropped into this entirely new world to me. And I fell quickly in love with it, and it happened to be a snowy day and the weather was quite stark. So that was even better, the contrast between that and sitting in front of a computer, which I enjoy greatly, but it's some contrast, So on from there then, through them I met more people and who were into things like more hill walking. So I started doing, walking all around the hills of Ireland, and got into mountaineering through a similar group of people. We carried on doing that and ended up making a few trips to the Alps, doing an alpine climbing course. So had a reasonable mountaineering background as a result. And then a few of them were doing mountain marathons, like the Mourne Mountain Marathon, and the other ones that one or two that used to exist down south at the same time as well. There was the Canaria was the first one I did, and I got dragged into that as well. I kind of said, well, if your ex-girlfriend isn't going to do it with you, I'll do it. And then the ex-girlfriend didn't do it, so I got dragged in. And I remember doing what was, in some ways my first running race, and heading off for the first control, running with my good friend from Cove, Pat Kidney, and he was apparently thinking, "Oh, this is great! I'm loving it." And I was running behind him, going, "Oh my God, this is awful!" you know. But in the end, we did reasonably okay. We were in third position, come to the last control, made a complete mess of the last control, ended up fourth, and we both had the same attitude, which was, right, we got to come back next year and put this to rights and actually get on the podium. That sort of competitive side of hill walking, the mountain marathons became my highlight of the year, and I started doing more and more of those, to the extent where I had to stop doing the Mourne Mountain Marathon because I was remembering where all the controls were, because I have a good head for, location, and if I've been somewhere once before, I usually remember it. So they'd call out the control, I'd mark it on map, I say, oh yeah, that's where we did 3 years ago when the time blah. And so the same bunch of people, there are four of them, my mountaineering / mountain marathon friends. Three of them were doing the Dublin City Marathon in 1998, and as was becoming the house style, I decided to volunteer myself in to join them, because they were a good bunch of lads, and I was always impressed with them and wanted to give a go at what they were doing. So I can remember that our last long run before the marathon was probably the day I discovered I could run, because we were doing a 20K or something like that, 20 miler, I think it was, in the Phoenix Park, 2 laps of the park, and the car was parked somewhere up the middle, and as we were coming to the end of the 2 laps for the last sort of 300 or 400 meter run up the middle of the road to get to the parked car, I thought I was feeling great, so I decided I'd sprint for it, and one of them had this good sense to let me go. 2 of them tried to compete, and I dropped them both. And that's when I realized, okay, I think I can actually do these long runs quite well. So I adjusted my targets for Dublin and ran 2:57 as my first proper running race. So yeah, that to me is my start of my running, and from there it was just sort of find longer things to do until I find the upper limits, which has yet to happen.
When you look at, because a lot of people, and you have kind of alluded to it, mountain marathons and the element of running, you kind of fell in love with it. Most people start running and hate it instantly,
Yeah.
and can never get over the 5K element, and this is disgusting, and this is this. Education around running probably wasn't as strong as it is now in terms of general population. You kind of had to be involved in a club and coaches
Yeah.
to get to the snippets that we take as easy and everyone should know type things. What was your initial thoughts? Because this is a new year as well. People are probably got the first entry, a lot of first timers into Dublin. I'm taking you back 26, 7 years to go. The first 5K from being mountaineering, and it's fantastic. You've strong, your back is strong from getting up and
Yeah.
down the hills. You've a great, I suppose, muscular skeletal base, as in you have a strong
Yes.
body. How was it transitioning to the running and the road and no real view or a mountain, or how was that?
Yeah, I kind of, again, it was liking it, I suppose, was the key. I enjoyed the training, so I enjoyed going out for a run. I remember a friend of my girlfriend at the time said she drove past some runner and she could just see this big smiley head in him, and then then she had a good look and saw it was me. It's like, that was just me running along the road, basically. So yeah, I tended to be a happy runner, and that helps. And I had no structured training at all, but you're dead right that the background of the hill walking and the mountaineering meant that I had a good strong neuromuscular system, and probably a decent starting point for aerobics as well, although running is not no amount of walking will prepare you for running. That's going to hurt no matter what you do, and it's supposed to hurt, that's the thing, but the right kind of hurt. There's very different kinds of pain, and there's the building strength hurt versus the stop doing that hurt. And so yeah, I was just enjoying the process, and without having any structure, without having a coach or being too worried about it. I was just taking it as it comes, really. And in a lot of it, and for most of my career, I've been making it up as I go along and just increasing the amount of knowledge bit by bit as I go. But I've never actually been coached, and I was quite late joining clubs as well. I would encourage people to join clubs though, because they're great, and there's an awful lot you get out of them. You always get out more than you usually get out a lot more than you expect. I was lucky that I got away with it, and I think that's down to natural ability, quite frankly. And there's no two ways around that. It's the old Seb Coe thing. What's the key to being an Olympic champion? It's choosing your parents very carefully. Natural ability, unfortunately, is probably the number one criteria. And I will not bullshit by saying, oh, it was all the hard work, blah, 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 I put in. I'm just lucky, that I have this. I happened to find a sport that I was naturally good at, Luckily, I didn't want to be a sprinter, because otherwise I'd have had a miserable life. It just so happens that, the sports I was falling in and liking, I turned out to be naturally good at. And it is quite a big key. You add in the hard work and you get better at it, but the natural ability helps a long way, that's for sure. I hope that answered the question.
Absolutely. You said then when you got that 2:57 marathon, and some people were thinking, oh, I want to go faster than this, but you wanted to go longer.
Well, it was a bit of both.
Okay.
Because I did want to go faster, and I ended up in the end doing 7 conventional marathons, as I call them, 5 on the road. And they're an interesting story in their own right, in that I have a fastest marathon, a best marathon, and a best result, and they're all different. Because my fastest marathon was, I did 3 Dublins, and the last one I did in 2:41, which is my PB. And it's hard work getting from 2:57 down to 2:41. And the next big target is 2:30. And I was just thinking, yeah, I can probably get there, but do I want to get there? And, in the end, 2:30 marathon is a kind of so what position. It's good, but it's not gonna, it's nowhere near. Yeah, exactly. It's nowhere near, being a really good marathon runner. It just makes you a pretty good marathon runner. Whereas I was actually far more interested in exploring out the distance anyway. But, speed's a huge benefit. And then my best marathon my best marathon was Snowdon, which I did. I think about 4 years afterwards or something like that, and because that's got 1,000 meters of climb and descent in it, and I did that at the time. My PB was 2:48, and I did Snowdon in 2:52. So that was definitely, relative terms, that was the best performance once you allow for that height thing. Because I went from, there was a hill at about mile 23, and I went from 11th to 5th on that hill, which is a lot of places to get at the top end of a marathon in one mile or so. And that's all down to the hill ability.
Was that a significant, or your first, obviously you'd been on the mountain, so you can walk up them, but to take that road kind of game and go, well, I can do 2:41 over Dublin, and to do that over that kind of elevation, was that the first inkling to you that, hold on a minute, I'm actually, the hillier it is, the stronger I am, and that's probably where I need to be?
It was part of it. The bigger one was probably, at the time, there was only one ultra marathon in Ireland, which is what's now the Morris Mullins, and what was then the Wicklow 50k. Because it was run by Morris back in those days. And I did. Because I could remember as a hill walker myself and my friend Pat looking at people starting out on the Morris Mullins from a hill opposite and saying, those mad Egypts, what are they doing? Why would anyone do that? And then, of course, a few years later, I'm the mad Egypt doing exactly that. So, and that was my first inkling of being a good ultra runner over hills, because the first time I entered it, it was kind of a 4-way battle for the win, and I came, again, similar story, I came 4th of those 4, but being part of the battle was the key, and was what was throwing me in that, this is great fun, first of all, but clearly I'm good at this as well, and obviously if you're good at it, you enjoy it all the more, and that was another one where I was keep coming back until first of all winning it and then breaking the record, and because it a hell of a target record, which took me a lot of banging away with it until I got to it. And I still count my setting the record on the original course of that as being possibly my best single record, even though it's quite an obscure one, because it's locked away now. It'll never be beaten, and ended up being 9 minutes. I did 3:21, which beat an old 3:30 record, which over that kind of distance is fairly shifting, and I did it finishing thinking I could do a second lap here at the same speed and be fine. It was just one of those days where everything runs perfectly and you're just in top form the whole way. And yeah, so one of those ideal days. So that race was probably the one where I started realizing that, I had a good ability. And on the basis of doing well at that, I got picked up for my first Irish Vest for 100k on the flat. Which was up in Edinburgh in the Anglo-Celtic Plate. And that was another big learning one, because I ran that, and this is way back in the days before you'd get, any of us were running with timing devices, which would take intervals or anything like that. If you wanted to split, you took it yourself with pen and paper or whatever, or had someone else do it for you. And that race had splits because it was lapped. And I was kind of disgusted with myself at the end of the race because I'd been doing 16-minute laps for the first 50k and 18-minute laps for the second 50k, and I wasn't happy about the fact that I'd lost that 2-minute in the laps. But I went around and they put up everyone's intervals who had taken part in a big sports hall where the prize giving was, and I went around and looked at everyone's lap times afterwards and realized I had the smallest fall off of anyone in the entire race and the most consistent pacing. And that was one of the things that made me realize even when I'd gotten it wrong, I was still performing better than we're actually an international athlete field in terms of pacing. And to this day, I'd count pacing as one of my natural kind of superpowers, if you know what I mean, that I can pace things really well. And it is actually a big key to getting good results over any distance, is get your pacing right,
Have you ever met the wall? Because I have. I've been there. I've leaned against it. I've got sick against it. Everything against this wall. Is it something that, based on, as you said, the natural superpower, or has there been a point in this journey up to this point that you've gone, or maybe that race was, I think I made a mistake here because I dropped off by 2 minutes? Is that your definition of the wall?
No. I have had. I mean, even one of my most recent races, the Tour de Glaciers last year in September, I was at one aid station for well over 12 hours because I had come to a crashing halt. Now, it's not what you'd call conventionally hitting the wall, but it's hitting a wall, that's for sure. And that I'd lost the ability to breathe, basically.
Oh,
I'd had some kind of chest issue going on, and I wasn't the only one, but I was going pretty well coming into this aid station, stopped at the aid station. Then once I got going, I was just could barely move, and it was like sitting on the trail, stopped completely, wondering, do I go on in the crawl or do I, spend 10 minutes sitting there, sorry for myself, trying to figure out what to do. Wandered back to the aid station. I knew that I had friends coming behind. I said, I'll go for sleep, wait for them, see if I can go out with them. Did that. Same thing happened, went back. One more friend came, went out with him. Same thing happened, went back. Pretty much had given up, and then looked at my watch and realized, okay, I've got enough time. Just if I leave now and I do okay, I might make the next cutoff where they'll chuck me out of the race. So I just said, okay, I'll get up, give it a go, and see what happens. And I made that cutoff and kept going. So, but yeah, that was hitting our wall in a big way, and that I was stopped for.
You couldn't breathe for someone who has course record after course record after world record after the Irish record here and there, and you can't breathe for a segment. Are you not worried about, like, not this is the end of the race, but this is the end?
I was worried that I might have pneumonia. That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
So I was, and that's why I was, backing off every time, because there's no point trying to push through something like that. So, but then once it felt not quite as bad and good enough that I could run, then then I went for it. But that's not the first time. The previous time I did Tour de Glaciers, which is an absolutely tremendous race. And last year was one of my favorite race experiences of all time, the way it went. And, but the previous time I'd done it 2 years ago, not the similar thing happened where I ended up in one aid station and I'd made a few navigational issues, beforehand, which had probably got to me a little mentally, and then it was a hot day and I got quite exhausted, and a relatively flat section which was relatively boring took us into an aid station, and it just all accumulated up so that I ended up saying, okay, I'm taking a 4-hour break there. Got up after when they woke me up and said, no, not entirely right, I'll take another 2 hours, what the hell. Got up after those 2 hours and saw it was raining and said, when's it due to stop raining? They said just before dawn or something like that. I said, okay, get me up when that happens. In for a penny, in for a pound. So there's another place where I spent pretty much 12 hours. So I went in just before I had to put the head torch on, and as I left, I turned the head torch off 5 minutes after I left. So it was a complete night at an aid station. So yeah, these things happen. But, the key, the great thing about big, long, multi-day races like that is you can often have time to recover. And, you're better off using that time, rather than just quitting.
When you have the likes of the 100K race and the Irish bib for the first time, and did that conflict you in terms of ultra, road, flat versus hills, or was it how can I manage to complement the two and still get that feeling of a green bib and the Anglo
Yeah,
Irish?
it was never a conflict. To me, it was always complementary. One was helping the other, and I was very happy straddling the two worlds because very few people do both of them. Even internationally, there's not that many people are happy running both the looped flat ultras and the trail ultras, and you get very different things out of both of them, and they take certainly take a different kind of mindset in terms of both of them, but being able to do it all is hugely advantageous. Because you can run into obstacles in one that the other will have taught you how to deal with. Like bad weather in a flat ultra can frazzle a lot of people when if it starts heavily raining. Whereas if you're a trail runner, that's a standard issue. You know exactly what you're doing there. Likewise, if you come to a long flat section on a trail race, a lot of people can go to pieces mentally. Whereas it's like, oh, it's like a 24-hour run, but not quite as bad. So on you go. So no, it was never a conflict. And I greatly enjoyed both, and when I was good at both, I was definitely getting as much out of either in different ways. But there's a lot to get out of it. Funny enough, most people would assume that the trail stuff is harder. You can be out there responsible for your own life and safety and navigation and gear, etc., very isolated out in the middle of nowhere. But I always enjoyed that and was kind of exhilarated by it. And I would say actually the harder one is actually, being on a flat loop for whatever 24, or to take the extreme version, a 500-meter loop indoors, for 6 days. I call that one the prison in my own head, because there's a big mental challenge there, obviously, and to me that's actually kind of the harder one, because you've no choice but to keep going when you're out in the wilds, and the aid stations are obvious places to get to and targets. Whereas when you're doing the looped, you make your own targets, and you have to make your own targets. And, the motivation, if you want to walk off, you can do it anytime. It's easy, you just literally walk off.
When it's trail, you gotta go to the spot.
Yeah, it's in a lot of ways the easy ones are the harder ones, and the harder ones are easy.
In this 6-day one, is that the one you did in 2015? You're talking about, was that a 500-meter loop where you finished second in the 6-day World Trophy in
that was
Hungary?
That was about a 900-meter loop. That was in Hungary. So I've done 3 of them. The first one I did was in New York, which was exactly 1 mile loop. and I won that one, and which was great because it's quite a historic race, and so I was really delighted to win that one, because I'd heard so much about it, and to have my first go to 6-day and win it was outstanding. And I made one big mistake there, which was that I pulled out after I reached 500 miles because I knew I had it won. And I just have had the proclaimers quoted at me for months afterwards. And it's like, oh, God, I should have just done one more mile. Yeah. But, but that was great. And then I did Hungary a year or two later, I think it was. And yeah, that was a better performance, 8 to 16K, a little more beyond 500. Jeez. And Joe Fages was at that one. And he's my first multi-day flat race. I'd met Joe for the first time, which was in a 3-day race in Arizona called Across the Years, because literally you start in one year and finish in another. And Joe had won it the year before. And I'd heard about it from Tony Mangan, and because Tony had done well there, he'd come second. And I went and scared the bejesus out of Joe Fages, and because he wasn't expecting, he didn't know anything about me, and we had a most fun race against each other, and we ended up having a massive all-out sprint on the last day of a 3-day race to kind of sort, because he was following me, because he knew if he stuck behind me, he'd hold his lead, and I took the attitude, well, if you're going to give me control of pacing, I'm going to fuck around with you. Pardon my French. So I did, because I had nothing to lose. So we ended up doing these mad sprinty stuff, and I was just trying to break him. Yeah, but in the end, I broke first. But we both enjoyed it so much that we were very, very happy. So I became only the fourth person to do 300 miles in that race, and I'm the only one there not to win it. And the other two, Joe obviously did 300 miles to beat me. He did more, and the other two were Yanis Kouros, who's the greatest ultra runner of all time, and John is a multiple-time American champion. Anyway, so I was up there with the greats, which looks great in paper. And then New York was doubling it up to 6 days, which is a much more classic distance, and it's one of the 24, 48, 6. They're the classic flat distances really, and so 6 was the big target of mine because it's the longest, and that was the only time I've ever entered a short race, in that there were 2 races running in parallel. There was a 6-day and a 10-day, and that's the only time I've not taken the longest option, just because I wanted to do 6 days because it's classic distance.
I can't imagine anyone begrudging you that now.
Yeah, I know. It's a sprint race of 6 days. So that, and then Hungary, as you say, was the world champ. So to get in second in that was good, and that I think still stands to the Irish record, the 8:15 or 8:16 I did in that. Jeez. And I did a third one there 2 or 3 years ago indoors in goes around an ice rink in Milwaukee, and that was far more interesting than I thought it was. I thought it'd be torturous, but it was actually oddly entertaining going indoors for 6 days around an ice rink. Well, I only lasted 5 because I managed to give myself an injury, but I still won the male race, so that was that kept the record of that intact anyway.
Ian, can I ask you a little bit about a 6-day race? Because I'm listening, and Sean has done 24-hour races, so he has a brief understanding, but how do you prepare? How do you strategize? What equipment do you accept, especially when you talk about racing these greats? Does sometimes the preparation go out the window and you're like, forget about sleep, this is war? How do you plan a race, strategize something over that length of time?
Oh yeah, well, the ability to improvise and make up your strategy on the fly is absolutely key for almost any ultra, because no plan is going to survive contact with reality. It's the old Mike Tyson thing as usual. It's all very well till you get punched in the mouth, and these things give you a good old whack in the mouth every bloody time. So that's hardly a flat looped race. I can't remember any flat looped race where I haven't found myself in the middle of it thinking, why am I doing this? I'm never doing one of these things again. I think every single time that thought has come in, it doesn't happen as much at all in the mountain runs, but it always seems to happen in the flat ones. But they have their rewards when you get through them in the end. And then you forget all the pain, not long afterwards. So yeah, you have strategies, you have plans. Like I'll have multiple sets of shoes for a 6-day, and there'll be different types of shoes on different lasts, so that different parts of the feet will get different impact. Multiple pairs of socks for similar reasons. Just all these things about taking care of yourself and protecting yourself. For particularly when you go multi-day, it's all about protecting yourself from injuries and strain, etc., etc. And that's the prime thing. You're not going to go out there with fast sprinting shoes. You're going to go out there with the shoes that are going to make your feet survive the longest. And sleep strategy, I'd have an idea what I wanted to do. The longer the race, the longer the sleep you need per day. So, short race, you might need any. Once it goes to about 48 hours, then you're going to need sleep. If I can make it to 48, the longest I've gone without sleep is 54 hours, and that was not deliberate. I wasn't able to sleep in the last aid stations because the winds were so strong. Sleep was impossible, so I ended up having to run through a full race of 54 hours. My head was all over the place with sleep deprivation through that night. But so yeah, and then for a 6-day race, I'll be strategizing, at least 2 hours sleep per day. But the advantage of the looped race is you can do that on feel, and particularly with an indoor one where you're not dealing so much with day and night, you can really do it on feel. But usually it's circadian rhythms will take care of the sleep for you. Especially if you're out in the trails. I'll be very conscious of when the sun's going to go down, and because when the sun goes down in the second night, that's when the sleep heebie-jeebies usually start to hit me. So I'll want to get ahead of that game, because I've been out there horribly sleep deprived when you can't stop or do anything about it because the weather's so bad and be so dangerous to stop. That's torture. Sleep deprivation is literally the most effective form of torture. So this is what we're doing to ourselves and paying good money for. So I want to avoid that very much so, because I'm doing it for pleasure. I don't want to torture myself. So these days I'm still learning all the time. One of the great things about ultra running is I'm 26 years at it, and I'm still learning all the time about how to do things better, and I love that about it. And sleep is part of that. I'm a lot better at it now. It's a long time since I've had bad sleep deprivation, but I'm still working on it. It's still something I have to consciously think about and strategize about. Every race is a different strategy, because you feel different. So you won't feel the same way twice in 2 different races. Again, that's a great thing.
Do you ever take a lie on a Saturday, or?
Oh God, yeah. Absolutely.
I find it hard to get out of bed, out of a warm, cozy bed, to go for a run on the side of a track, on the side of everything. Do you have support there to be like, Ian, it's time to get up, it's time to? Or how do you motivate yourself? Or is it the race feeling that you're lucid sleep, you get some rest, you get up, and then you go?
Yeah. The easiest time for me to get up and run is during a race. Yeah. Normal Saturdays, very hard for me to get up. I'll take a long time getting up and all it takes. But race is one of the only times I'll the alarm will go off, I'll pop out ready, most of the time, start of the race, I'll pop out, ready to go, bang. It takes a lot more effort in the middle of the race, because especially, when you're sleep deprived going in, and you go out in seconds and you sleep like the dead, and then someone kindly wakes you up, taking their life in their hands, and it's like you're usually being pulled out of this lovely, fluffy, happy place into horrific, dark, nasty environment. It's like, oh God, I'm still in the middle of a race and I have to get up and get out of this. And because restarting is torture, always. And so minimizing restarts has always been a target for that reason, because they're so bloody hard, But again, it's down to individuals.
Do you train yourself for this in any which way, or is it just because sleep deprivation? Don't want to hit that at any stage. Can you even do you run during the night and stuff like that in your training leading up to these races, or how do you do it?
No, I mean, I used to do a lot of adventure racing, and we used to do some training for that, as in, do long overnight stints and things like that. And I can actually remember literally sleepwalking in one of those training stints. But yeah, the theory is not really.
Right.
It's not something you can train for. And I often disagree with a lot of theory about what's doable and what's not doable. There's an awful lot of conventional running theory I would argue is completely wrong, but that one I would say, yeah, that's probably correct. You can't train yourself for sleep deprivation. You can train yourself to get to sleep faster, and have better sleep. But I'm not sure you can train yourself to deal with sleep deprivation.
Is a lot of the theory out there now on marathons and maybe even 100K, and then there's very little afterward. They just in their mind they go, oh, times that by 7 and it must be the same thing, and it goes on a conventional path that way. But I just so many external factors I can only imagine comes into it when you're actually getting to days you're running.
Yeah, and there's very little theory out there. Absolutely, very little useful theory or experiment, because it's a very hard thing to run a useful scientific experiment on. So generally all there is in terms of sports science is feedback that people have provided and statistics on the basis of that, and that's anecdotes. That's a collection of anecdotes. It's not scientific theory. So again, part of the beauty of it, if you like me, and I come from a science background and have always been curious about how the world works, etc., and I question everything when it comes to theory, and the answers I tend to get tend to be minority answers. So, and I encourage people to do that as much as possible. Ignore the theory, because most of it's wrong, and most of it has very little basis on good scientific fact. I mean, some does, but a lot of what you hear as gospel is rubbish. Like when I started running, the big thing was, you have to stretch before you run. It's the most important thing. And now that's completely thrown on its head. It's like that stretching before you run is more likely to injure you. So, that's an example of where, old theory got questioned and is thrown out. And so, yeah, when it comes to multi-days, you're basically making it up as you go along. And one good thing I've heard is, on a very knowledgeable ultra running list on the web is, if you ask 10 ultra runners about what's the best way to train for a 6-day race, you get 14 different answers. That's about the size of it. And they'll all be right, and they'll all be, there is no right way. There's one or two fundamental things, like you've just got to do a lot of volume, and you should mix in the 80-20 rule has got an awful lot of good science backing behind it. Beyond that, not a lot. People are basically making it up as they go along. For years I used to say to myself, next year I'm going to do proper structured training with a actual real plan. I'll do that next year and see how good I am. And it never really happened. And I eventually realized, because it's far less important than actually most people think. Once you got the basics right, and you are doing most of your runs easy, some of them hard, that covers it. The rest is details.
I have to ask, and you've probably been asked this so many times since you did it. I read that doing research on this, your favorite place to run in one of them was the Frozen Head State Park, the Barkley Marathons. For those that don't know, why are the Barkley Marathons what they are? The race that eats its young, I've heard they've been called.
Yeah, that's its tagline. It's the hardest running race in the world. That's what people say, and from my experience, it is absolutely. You go into it, only 40 people get picked to do it every year. The mysterious entry process is a challenge in itself. There are about 2,000 or so people, I think, manage to figure it out per year, and then 40 get picked. And those 40 tend to be incredible people, and it's just a great place to be hanging around with those people. And their one allowed crew person, and then the race crew, Laz himself, is just there's only one or two people I've been tongue-tied around. When I first met them, Laz was one of them, because it's he's quite intimidating. But despite being an extremely nice person, it's Laz. Oh my God. Because he's sharp as nails, so if you say something stupid, he'll know. But it's such a hard race, and it's deliberately designed to be just on the edge of what a human being can do, the 5 laps in 60 hours. And if someone completes it, then they'll make it a little harder the next year, and so on. So the idea is to keep it just on the edge of what a human can do, and that's why it's so hard. And you do have the best people coming to try and do it, and failing miserably. We all go in, I'm sure, thinking, how hard can it be? I've done this, that. I'm good at this, I'm good at that. How hard can it be? And the answer is, bloody hard, actually. Yeah. The first lap I did was probably the most mentally intense 9 or 10 hours of my life, because the navigation aspect of it is intense. It's harder than orienteering, because you have to be on the course the whole time. Orienteering, you just have to hit the controls. So, you're navigating 100% all the time. And I knew that I had to be able to find the same route backwards in the dark. So I was whilst navigating, trying to remember how to do this backwards, because I knew I'd need it for the next lap. And that was just a very intense 9 hours, the most intense mentally I think I've ever had, and I loved it as a result. And then the reverse lap, I broke my collarbone, so that didn't help. So I did most of that lap with a broken collarbone, but I did it in great company, so that made it an absolute laugh. But what I discovered on the reverse lap is that the difficulty when you get the nav right is that the up and down is just so relentless. It's extreme. It's just steep up, steep down, steep up, steep down. And there's no hiding and no escape. So something will get you. A friend of mine, who I actually met in the 6-day race in Hungary, he was Joe Fage's support guy, and he's one of the Barclay organizing team, as it turned out. I didn't realize it at the time, but I fell in with the right crowd. And he says that to do the Barclay, you need every tool in the toolbox. If you're missing one, you're no chance. You need everything. And that's conventional things like speed, ability to climb and descend, plus navigation, plus mountain craft, and this is why the likes of Jasmine Paris is so much better than Courtney Dowwater in Barkley. Courtney is the much better Courtney is the greatest ever conventional trail runner, but she's only I think completed 2 laps in the Barkley. Whereas Jasmine, it would be a slower runner, but she's much more has the mountain craft and the navigational skills and all those other extra tools in the toolbox that would be the Courtney's relative weakness in this case, but only in this case. So it's a very interesting race on those grounds. The fastest guy who was there the first year I did it was, I think he was an ex 100k world champion, and he didn't get remotely close to getting the first lap, because despite being the fastest guy there.
Ian, can I ask for the numbers, because understanding how you take on the race, 100% understand, but what does the end of that race look like in terms of the numbers, to give us an insight into why it is on the edge of what's humanly possible?
I think I can't remember the exact numbers, but something like 30 years of it running now, there's a total of 21 people have finished. And about 6 of those has been in the last 2 or 3 years. And for many, many years there was no finishers, and a good year would be 1 finisher. And we're back to 0 finishers by a long shot last year. So it's just, and again, these are not chump runners. These are, some of the best runners in the world, people who set records, FKTs for the Appalachian Trail, FKTs all over the place, international champions at all sorts of levels. The winners of the the easiest way to get in is to win the big dog's backyard ultra, that's an auto entry. And he doesn't get close to finishing either. So that'll tell you, you know. So you never know where win is going to come from, because it takes that combination of skills and luck and helpful weather.
You said you met Laz, and he's a very nice lad. But when the three people, I think Jasmine Parks finished it, maybe in my head it's last year, the year before, and then I seen all the comments being like, "Oh, no one's finishing next year." It was almost like he was annoyed three people finished, and then it was that hard that no one finished. Is that the way it really is?
If someone finishes, he will make it harder. Absolutely, yeah. And I think the word on the street is that they kind of overdid it last year and made it just a bit too. They ramped it up too hard. They'll probably soften it slightly next year, would be my guess. But it's all guesswork with the Barkley. You know, I've got some inside knowledge, but still, it's all guesswork if you're not Laz.
You broke your collarbone when you did that, and I was looking. Am I right in saying the following month you set a course record in Northern Transverse? It was like 4 different one of them.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Unbelievable. How did these kind of races compare to your Northern Transverse, your spine races and stuff? Not compared to Barclays, that their own thing, but just in their own. If someone's listening, going, I may have, not me, but I may have done Arthur O'Neill over the weekend, and I want to go maybe over, across the sea to try one of these other kind of trail runs. What are these races like?
The thing with any of these races is, they're all just there. The key to completing them is just to want to do them. You know, it is that simple, you know, and then people ask me, what does it take? It just takes a desire. You know, there's no magic. There's no magic distance. There's no magic hardness, apart from the Barkley, maybe. You know, everything is just there, and, you know, just give it a go. I always say the best thing you can do for any race is to give it a go, because the worst thing that happens is you don't finish, but you learn so much that then if you go again, you're far more likely to finish than if you just sit around theorizing about it or doing theoretical training. And the best thing you can do is just go do it. And as I get older, that's become even more so for me, because, you know, every year I'm a little bit slower, and then 1 year less opportunities to do things. So now I'm in an even bigger hurry to, if I think about it and I want to do it, I'll just go do it. And that's the right attitude, I think, for any event. And there's nobody who's not capable of giving one of these things a go, you know. If you want to win it, it's a totally different thing. But if you just want to go out there and experience it, just go do it. You know, it's that simple. And I always encourage everyone to do it. A lot of these, the likes of the Northern Traverse is timed so it can be walked. So, you know, if you walk at speed, you will finish it. Similarly, the spine, you know, you can do a lot of that at walking pace and get around and finishing it. Although I just cut a couple of hours off the cutoffs for next year. I just read literally an hour ago. But yeah, a lot of these things, you know, they're journeys. They're exploring, and the key now, if you're not out there to win, the key is to enjoy the journey, and that's it. So just go do it, you know. So for me, the bigger they are, they're not intimidating. It's more worth the journey. It's more worth the flights to get there and do it. You're going to get multiple days out of it, you know. So yeah.
Does that excite you more, or, you know, I've seen you've done, like, for example, the fastest known time across up the country, going from Mizen to Mallonhead.
Yeah.
Are you looking at those kind of things now, or are you looking at what's the next kind of race I haven't done in terms of navigation, or do you like going, right, I've set a time here, I need to beat that time again? What excites you more?
Well, I'm getting slower, and there's no two ways about it. I'm 57 now, and I think at about 52 to 53, that's where the brakes came on, and I don't think I'll ever podium in a race again. So it's just a matter of accepting that and changing how I enjoy the races. So it's kind of pressure off for me, I get to go around saying, "Oh, I'm just an old man," you know. So I'm just out here.
You can't lose to me.
Oh, but I would. Believe me, it's terrible what's happened to my speed. You know, my endurance is everything is holding up except speed. So you know, but that obviously is quite fundamental to competing. So now I get totally. I now look to get totally different things out of it. So yeah, I'm looking for enjoyable races to do. That would be a great experience to take part in, and see new parts of the world, that kind of thing. That excites me more, and that's why I've and in the last few years I've been far more the trail ultras and a lot less of the flat looped ones, because most of the flat looped ones are all the same. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not still engaged with the flat loop ones. I actually help organize a global organization of multi-day ultra runners, which is a new body to kind of put some kind of structure on multi-day governance. And I'm on the committee for that. So I'm still very much engaged with it. And I would still anticipate doing a few more of these races, and possibly, if I can get my speed good enough to look at if I can get age group records here or there, I would give it a crack. I do have one world age group record from that across the years race, which is still hanging in there. So that I like that, because most of my records have been broken, but which is great in itself. But hanging into one is good. So yeah, I'm not giving up. Is in the parameters change. I'm not chasing overall records. I'm chasing age group records. I'm chasing experience, and I'll still, if I'm in a race, I'll still be looking around to see, who else is in my age group. Even if there's not an age group prize, I'll actually, at the results, I'll look, did I win my age group?
Multi-day then in Ireland at the moment. I know there's one that goes in the summer from, I think it's from Brain Wicklow, goes across then to Kerry and stuff like that. Is there many...
that's unlikely to happen again for a while, just for insurance reasons. That's
right.
Again, I help organise IMRA, so I know that's the problem there. The insurance just had a complete conniption about that one and said we're not doing that again.
Is there so people looking at that and knowing that's out? What's there for people on the island then for people to do for multi-day? Would you recommend?
I'm not sure we have much in multi-day at the moment. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but there's plenty nearby to travel to. The international candidate these days, I mean, we're so lucky that we're living in an era of easy flights and easy travel. It's just, there's no excuse for not
one of them was I only saw recently on your Instagram, a 360 Gran Canaria.
Gran Canaria, yeah. That's a multi-day trail race. 360 is for the 360 degrees around the island, so it does a loop of Gran Canaria. So I've done 5 of them so far, and the great thing about that particular race, it's on in November, which is a great time of year because not a lot goes on in November, and weather's crap in Ireland, and you get to go down to Gran Canaria, where it's completely the opposite. You're really, I say to people, if you want to get the closest to Barkley experience without going to Barkley, have a go at Trans Gran Canaria, because they will send you down some trails that will give you the full Barkley experience. As in, I remember one race briefing, they said, someone asked, they said, this trail is hard to find, and one of the runners asked, how hard to find? And the answer was, basically, it's not there. So, and that was fairly accurate. So yeah, it's a challenging race, and they change the route every year. Which makes it really interesting, and so you never know what's coming. And you run along these beautiful trails, it's absolutely marvelous, and you think everything is running well, and then you change onto a different trail. It's like, oh, holy God, what is this? I the first time I ran with a Garmin for navigation was in 360 2 or 3 years back, and I hadn't I hadn't fully configured it, so it was beeping every mile, which I would turned off as quickly as I could figure out how to do it. But I'd look every beep, and I could see I was doing 30-minute miles. And it's like, how do you explain to people that 30-minute miles is full speed? The trails are that difficult. It's just combat running. But yeah, I loved it. Absolutely, it's a great race, and I couldn't recommend it strongly enough. And again, it's multi-day. It's about 250 to 300 kilometers generally, and usually takes 2 to 3 days. But beautiful area, great organizers, lovely people. You get an awful lot of people returning again and again, and some of the really well-known multi-day ultra runners like Claire Banworth and Luca Papi, who has done every single one of them and will continue to do so. And yeah, it's just I love it. It's the first race down on my calendar every year. I've already booked the accommodation for this year because I know the dates, even though they haven't done anything else. I know the date and the start line, so I booked the accommodation.
Ian, before, just to wrap the podcast, I have asked this question on, I don't know when this episode come out, but last week we did a podcast on this. You set a course record multiple times, the Arthur O'Neill Challenge. How in the name of God do you run between checkpoint 1 and checkpoint 2 when your feet are going that deep into muck and mesh and rivers and all the rest? And then literally climbing mountains or parts to try and find the cross, along with navigation. I'm sure you probably did navigation back in the day doing it, because I saw you did 2014 records and all the rest. How do you actually race that race in and get 5+ hours?
I've had some of the most fun races in that one, actually, because back when it first started, and I was there for the first one, it was organised by a friend of mine, Garrod Towie, the very first running of it. Garrod was an Olympic rower, and he rowed across the Atlantic, and he rowed most of the way across the Atlantic before his boat was smashed by a big wave and had to be rescued, which was quite a dramatic, that was headline news. That was all very dramatic. So Garrod's a good old tough boy. Olympic rowing might look very sedate, but rowers are tough as hell. They are unreal. They can take pain like almost no one else. So Garrod set up the race as a charity fundraiser, and I can remember giving the briefing, despite being in it, giving the briefing and telling everyone else how to navigate the race in a room in Dublin Castle before we all set out. So I loved the early days because navigation back then, we weren't running with GPS watches. I was hand navigating with the map and compass, and basically my head, knowing that generally head south, and that will do it. So, and the more murkier and the more muckier it got, the happier I was. In the first few years, boy, it was icy cold. I can remember year 2, there were sheets of ice on the road, and you had to, you go flying, straight away, literally sheets and sheets of ice, 50 meters long. So you'd have to work your way around it. So you had all these challenges. Plus back then, the bridge over the river near just before what's now checkpoint 1, that bridge was taken out in a flood, so you had to do a different route up by Capura Centre and over the mountain behind it, and that's actually a harder route and even more remote and muckier and more tufty bog. So it was
wow.
those times were a lot slower, I could tell you, because it was longer and harder, but I loved that. But yeah, I managed to keep winning it for 4 or 5 years. 'Cause again, it's that navigation thing gave me a slight edge where I know exactly what I'm doing, and that's one of the trickiest navigational places you'll find anywhere. All those peat hags. I used to send my adventure racing colleagues out there. They asked for navigation tests, and that's where I'd send them with a few points to find, and they'd come back and curse me and thank me at the same time because it's so difficult to navigate. But if you get it right, it's it's a huge sense of reward. And the Arthur O'Neill was like that. And there were certainly initially very different lines you could take that were, there were a few different options in terms of where you go, through Arts Cross or through the hill behind it and up over there. But generally you just kept heading south, and yeah, I loved it. I loved the remoteness of it, and I used to get in front enough so that no other head torches around. I'd be out there in the middle of the night on my own. Love it. Absolutely love it. And I can remember one of the years I banged myself, fell into a stream, cut my knee open, ended up running to the finish, seeing the medics, and they sending me off to A&E having won the race.
Jesus.
You get that whole wound cleaned out and stitched up, but all part of the game. You can't let these things panic you. And yeah, I can remember having a great head-to-head with Paul Tierney, the great Paul Tierney, who is another great ultra runner. I call him on my phone. I have him as FCH Paul Tierney, which stands for former Cork hurler, because every media article about Paul tends to start with former Cork hurler Paul Tierney, because he has an All Ireland medal, which makes him royalty in Cork, where we're both from. So yeah. So he's far more royal than I am. But so we had a great head-to-head one year, and Yeah, I managed to sneak aside him when I had to stop for a pit stop, and he kept going. And just before a particular route, I knew that he didn't, and I snuck in front. And yeah, there's all this kind of proper racing stuff going on. All's fair in love and war.
Absolutely brilliant. It has been brilliant listening for the last hour or so. I could listen for at least another 3-4 on top of that.
The problem is I could keep talking for another 3-4.
I'm sure you could.
That's the problem. We barely touched the surface here,
I knew, look at the list of stuff you've done. I don't even think we touched half the stuff we talked about in the intro from your 4-hour races. And, there's just so much there that we didn't even go near. But that's your fault for doing too much, Ian. That's not on us, so we're not getting any blame for that.
No worries.
For those that do want to see more of your stuff, you have a website where you do a lot of blogging on not only your own races, but I know you're talking about the upcoming spine race and everything else. What's that website people do?
So I have it's Ian.Keith at or .wordpress.com or something like that. I've forgotten exactly. If you Google my name,
show notes. Yes.
Yeah, if you Google my name, you'll get it. Plus, I have a Facebook athlete page where a lot of stuff goes as well, and the blog references go. That's usually where most stuff ends up there eventually. Sorry, it's Facebook for the younger people, but I'm old.
Could be worse. We've gone back in logging at the row of Bebo and MySpace
again. Yeah. Well, I've been on the internet for a long time because as I say, I'm a techie person and it's kind of my area as well. So I was on the internet when there was only 2,000 websites. So you can imagine how long ago that was.
No, thank you very much for listening to this week's episode of the Any Given Run Day podcast with myself, Ian and Eric. Take care.